You're listening to the Roofing Success Podcast, a show created to inspire roofing contractors to achieve optimal success in their roofing businesses. I'm the host, Jim Moline, the co-author of the book, Internet Marketing for Roofing Contractors, How to Triple Your Sales and Turn Your Roofing Website into an Online Lead Generation Machine. I'm also the co-founder of Roofer Marketers, the digital marketing agency for the roofing industry. On each episode, I'll be sitting down with industry leaders to talk about their processes, the lessons they've learned, and how to find success in roofing. Welcome to another episode of the Roofing Success Podcast. As always, please share, subscribe, like, comment. What else could they do? Leave a review. Leave a review, huh? That'd be a good one.
Only good reviews, though.
Only good reviews.
Yeah, please. Yep. Keep it to yourself.
Please leave only good reviews. Yes. If you have a bad review, text me. My phone number's in the description. You could text me all of the bad reviews you want.
I'd give them a completely different number for the bad reviews.
Nice.
That's a
good idea.
You could just ignore that phone completely.
And if you would like to continue the conversation beyond what we're talking about here, go to Facebook, type in Roofing Success, and join the Roofing Success Facebook group. Today we have someone that I've gotten to know in the last couple of months because we're both mentors in Adam Benjamin's Pitch Pro movement, and getting to teach contractors and to mentor contractors to really move their businesses along wherever they get stuck. He is definitely an expert in the insurance claims restoration business from a lot of different angles, and is the Dean of Students at the National Claims Institute. Mathew Mulholland, how are you today, buddy?
I'm doing fantastic, Jim. It's good to be on your show.
And one of my favorite marketers in the roofing business. I just want to let you know that. I love your marketing and branding I appreciate it. So,
well, I got this bull, and when you have a bull as your logo, you get to say all kinds of fun stuff.
That's right.
So, yeah, at the expos, I've got literal bullshit turds that I throw around and throw like a frisbee at people to get their notice. It's kind of fun.
Yeah,
you can do a lot with it.
You can, and a lot of people stepped in that bull as they were walking by our booths at the Roofing Process Conference, which were next to each other.
It slows them down for sure. Yeah,
slows them down, right? It slows them down. It slows them down. So for people in my audience that don't know who you are, haven't come across you before, you've been a contractor, you're a public adjuster, and you're the Dean of Students and one of the instructors at the National Claims Institute. Give a little background for people. Give a little intro.
All right. Well, yeah, I mean, you basically gave them everything that they really need to know. I'll give you a little bit more detail in there. So I started off in the industry as a roofer, as a roofing sales guy, even knocking on doors, just like most of your audience, I'm sure. Only I really sucked at it. I sucked at knocking on doors. I hated it. I did it because I had to, and I had a family. But like most of the people that are doing that, it's not the most fun, or it's very, very uncomfortable. I was better at the roof side of things, doing the inspections. So I developed a partner who would do the door knocking and talking while I did the inspection and came down and got down to business on things. And then I would meet with the adjusters. And eventually we started our own roofing company, which was pretty successful. We stayed fairly small. I think I had 5 sales staff members at one time. But laws changed in my state of Georgia, and I was forced into becoming a public adjuster. We opened a firm called All Good Adjustments that I opened up and left my business partner to do the roofing. So we split ways. He was a roofer, and I became public adjuster for All Good Adjustments. The roofing company was All Good Roof Systems. I wish I had done a different name, because in the adjuster's eyes, they combined them, which it doesn't work out very well. But I was doing claims for many different roofers, not just for that company. And because we had that relationship with that previous company, though, it did cause a little bit of conflict. But so All Good Adjustments has been doing residential claims for the last 7 years. And at one time, we were doing as many as 3,000 claims a year. We switched over to only large loss a year and a half ago. And during the COVID situation, I sold or technically merged my company with another, and All Good Adjustments is going to be shutting down. The benefit of that was I could then step away and do the things that I wanted to do. So for marketing for All Good Adjustments, I started a company called Listen to This Bull, and that's where the bull came to be. And actually the bull head was part of my All Good Adjustments logo as well. But we started the podcast and video series, Listen to This Bull. We did a lot of educational videos, and we provided a lot of free information to contractors and public adjusters. And I got a lot of business that way by, showing people that I knew what I was talking about, so they felt good about handing their claims over to us for us to handle. I think we developed a very good reputation among contractors in my state of Georgia. I became the president. I'm the current president of GAPIA, the Georgia Association of Public Insurance Adjusters, though my presidency ends at the end of December. So I don't know when you're going to air this, but if it's in January, I'm no longer the president. And thank God, because that's a lot of work. So after we merged companies and I was able to step away from All Good for the most part, it's still around, but it will be shut down as soon as all the claims are gone. I was able to open the National Claims Institute, which is in a brick and mortar that I'm standing in right now, located in New Smyrna Beach, Florida. And it is December 28th, and it is 81 degrees outside.
That's a beautiful thing.
It's great.
You should December 28th where I am, and it is it's a balmy 21. It's a balmy 21 here. Is that balmy? Balmy 21. It's shorts weather. It's shorts weather here in Minneapolis.
So there's probably some differences in the definitions of the words that we're using right now. That's part of the issue with most insurance policies, by the way. So we're doing the National Claims Institute, and for your audience members, our best courses happen to be roof inspection courses.
I was talking to John Scenic about that, and we were, I've had him on the show twice, and the last time I had him on, he was talking about his car method, and man, that guy like blows me away with his knowledge and in the shingle, in the shingle space. And he's like, I went down to Florida and took Matt's composition shingle course, and I was blown away. And I was like, and then talking to you at the Roofing Process Conference, just your knowledge in this industry, and then your vision for the National Claims Institute blows my mind. I mean, you told me you're working towards, what is it, like 400 courses in total over time, of course. You might not do that tomorrow, but
oh God, that would suck. 392 courses we have planned. Although I think we'll probably end up combining a few of them and adding to the list. But right now, that is what our list is. I think of that 392, we have so far released 9 different courses. Nice. And all of them so far in-person classes. We are a brick and mortar school, and I know that that's not exactly the most popular thing these days with all the COVID scenario going on. Everybody wants to do everything online or watch videos or something, but there is a lot to be said about hands-on instruction. In fact, at the end of our classes, we often ask our students what the best and the worst parts of the class are, so we can improve things. And the best parts of the class that they said, or have said every single time so far, is that they like the hands-on portion of it. They got more out of that because they were able to take the things that they were taught in class, and it was able to click for them when they actually went and felt it and saw it in person, and they got to understand what it is that we were trying to tell them during the class. So there's a lot to be said about doing that. Otherwise, definitely, you might learn something and not come across it in the field for years, and then you're going to forget what it is that you were looking at the first time around. So you don't want to just hold on to a lecture until you come across it the first time. You want to be able to see it and feel it firsthand right away in order to really make it sink in. I think it's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
But it is a little bit more costly to come down to Florida. But then again, it's 81 degrees.
That's right. So I like that you I like I mean, it's marketing, but it's also, you have some business acumen. You didn't put that your school in Minneapolis for where people could come in the winter for, when it's 10 below zero. They could make a vacation out of it. Go to the
Absolutely.
beach.
It's beautiful out here.
It's beautiful.
It's also the shark attack capital of the world,
Yeah.
but they only nibble. Small nibbles.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Sit on the beach and drink cocktails. Don't worry about going into
Plenty
the
of cocktails.
water. So we were talking about this composition shingle course, and really there's, kind of really 4 or 5 parts to it that are really important to a roofing company. And like going through this stuff. And the first thing that we were talking about is knowing building code. How well do you think most contractors study building code in their local areas?
I think that most roofers would agree with me, although it's not a very popular thing to say, but most roofers that are doing insurance claims barely look at the code, have no idea what's in it, the vast majority of them. And if you're one of the roofers out there that actually does pay attention to certain codes and things, kudos to you. You are a very small minority, unfortunately. But there's a lot to learn on that side. If you really study the code, there's more than just the IRC, IBC. You've got the International Existing Building Code, the IEBC, the International Property Maintenance Code, the IPMC. Those things tie into how insurance claims are worked, because you're talking about existing buildings, buildings that already are there, the roof is already on, and damage is occurring to that. That falls under the purview mostly of the IEBC, IPMC. You can get into re-roofing and recovering and things along those lines in the IRC, IBC, but most of the time we're dealing with carriers that want to do repairs. And so you really need to get into the other codes first and have them tie back into the IRC, IBC before you get to a recovery. But there's a lot to be learned there, a lot to be learned there.
A lot, right? And it's different from location to location. So if you're a company that maybe travels and chases storms, you have to come into an area and do some quick learning, right?
There are many states. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. There's many states with where the code is different for each municipality.
Yeah.
And then there's states that have, their own code completely. Florida has its own code.
Yep.
FLRC, their residential code, FLBC, all that fun stuff. So there's plenty to know. If you're going to work in multiple states, though, there's a lot more you need to dig into. But if you're only working in one state or one municipality, mostly, you really need to know at least that area's stuff. And we can give you most of the information that you need for most of the areas that you're working in, or at least point you in the right direction.
Yeah. So for a contractor in their local area, if they wanted to get started, hey, I really don't know the code in my area very well. What would your kind of suggestions be for that?
Have you ever heard of one-click code?
One-click code. My man Garrett, yeah, he's been on the podcast.
I love one-click code. Yeah. I've used that as late in my public adjusting career. We started using that when we were doing a lot of different states. It's extremely helpful. And as far as I understand it, they're being integrated into a lot of different CRMs and possibly even integrating with Company Cam or Hail Trace, one of those two, in the last month or so. I don't even remember. Great guy, though. I've talked to him myself.
Yep.
It's a good program, and it's something that definitely took a lot of blood, sweat, and tears worth of effort by this guy, and constantly being updated, and which is important because everything constantly changes on that.
So that's nice about kind of living in this nice technological age that we're living in, right? As someone has developed a software that with a click of a button, you could get this stuff. So really, I guess your suggestion is don't learn anything. Just go buy one-click code. No.
Well, it'll tell you what code to look for.
That's right.
You want to actually implement that code or explain what it is that code is saying to an adjuster or something. You really need to study it a little bit.
And that's where that's where it is, right? Like that's where the power in that knowledge is, and the power of having access to those codes is really you're using it as leverage.
Oh, right? Absolutely. You got to build it where we can.
As justification for for the claim. And so what are the crazy building codes that have you run into across the country that you're like, yeah, which could either help someone leverage a claim or really inhibits a claim?
All right, there's a few things in the 2012 IRC. The wording on one portion about flashing was a little bit wonky, and it caused some issues for some of the claims that we were dealing with. But it says for sidewall flashing, you can have either step flashing or continuous flashing. And so it gave you the option for sidewalls of step flashing or continuous flashing. What it was saying was that the code didn't specify, but then it also said previously in the code that you have to abide by the manufacturer installation guidelines, whichever is stricter. So the manufacturer installation guidelines required step flashing in most cases, but it caused us a lot of headache in trying to push different things to make step flashing possible. But often I had to, on site with an adjuster, explain by taking sheets of paper and showing them exactly how step flashing is laid out and why continuous flashing would actually lead to leaks down the road. But often they would argue that we ended up winning most of those arguments based off of nail holes and things, because most of the flashings aren't installed correctly anyway.
So that's, there's so many things. It's so technical. Like to me, especially because I don't do this, I'm not a roofer for a living, and I'm not up on roofs and doing this and going through the claims process with people. But I mean, the technical knowledge that you need in a lot of these, it's amazing. And it's super cool that you've put together courses that really get to educate these people. But in that knowledge, there's kind of a people side of it too. That when you're dealing with, I used to do like fix and flips in the Denver area. I used to do rehab houses, and I subcontracted all the work. So I essentially was the GC for my projects, and I'd do a project in this area and then in that area, and it always seemed to, like, it wasn't just the code. Sometimes it was how that municipality treated the enforcement of that code.
Right. Yeah. Enforcement. That's a fun word.
Enforcement. Right. So
yeah, there's a lot of municipalities that'll use that word, and the way that they use it will actually hurt you on an insurance claim, because most policies, if they do pay for any ordinance and law coverage, it'll pay for any increased costs above and beyond the normal scope of repairs, any increased cost caused by an enforcement of a ordinance or a law, building code, depending on the policy language. And so that word enforcement really matters a lot of times, but so does the word increase. And I don't think most people realize that, building code doesn't just pay for anything code related. It pays for anything that is an increased cost above and beyond the normal scope of repairs. So the enforcement of step flashing concerns, if a municipality doesn't enforce permitting for re-roofing, that doesn't mean that they don't enforce the step flashing stuff. The word enforcement, in a very basic sense, just means a looming threat of punishment. Yeah. If there's a possibility that you could be punished down the road for doing something wrong, it's enforced by God. So it's a looming threat. That's enforcement. But the way the wording in the policy is right, it's an increased cost. The flashing stuff is normal code related items. This is an increased cost above the normal scope of repairs. That generally does need an actual written enforcement. If the municipality requires that your shed roof be the exact same color and shingles as your house roof, and the shed roof isn't damaged, and they actually put something in writing saying that we enforce this kind of thing, that would be increased cost above the normal scope of repairs. And that would be something that ordinance and law would cover. But if they're just talking about putting in a cricket or something along those lines, that's a normal scope of repairs for a roof. That is not an increased cost. That wouldn't necessarily fall under ordinance and law. This is something that is very difficult to wrap your head around, because most roofers and public adjusters have been pushing ordinance and law coverage as an easy way to gain line items over the years. And we've taught the insurance companies to say, well, we don't have ordinance and law, so we're not going to pay you for flashing replacement. But it's a ridiculous thing. If they were only going to pay for code required things, if there was ordinance and law coverage, then they wouldn't pay for any repairs, because every aspect of the repair is something that is code required. That wouldn't make any sense. There would be a $10,000 limit. If there's a $10,000 ordinance and law limit on the policy, then every repair for any job would be $10,000. Even if the whole house burned down, everything to rebuild that house properly is written into code somewhere.
That's a lot of details about that. Like, and the way that the policies are written versus the way that the ordinances are enforced. And what's a good example of something that you've seen that you've helped overcome in one of those situations?
Flashing is very common there.
Okay.
If the flashing has to be replaced, a lot of public adjusters or contractors might say, well, they have ordinance and law coverage, they should get the flashings replaced. And that's just the wrong application of ordinance and law coverage. It would fall under your coverage A, your dwelling coverage, because it is the normal course of doing business. When you're re-roofing, you have to replace the flashing. It's written in the code that if it can't be reinstalled if it's damaged, deteriorated, or rusted. So, and that's in the IRC, IBC, and all the other FLs and Indianas or whatever. It's in there. But that doesn't mean that you need to have ordinance and law just because it's in the code. It's part of the normal course of doing business, part of the normal course of repairs when you're re-roofing. So unless you're installing something that doesn't exist on that roof, and there are some policies where it would be a code upgrade. If, for example, in Georgia in 2014, the drip edge became required when they upped to the 2012 IRC. Drip edge finally became required in Georgia because the whole state finally adopted the 2012 IRC. And most houses still to this day don't have drip edge because they haven't had a new roof installed yet. So if they didn't currently have drip edge, ordinance and law and in a lot of policies would be required in order for them to pay for that, because it is an increase in cost over the replacement of the normal roof. But it could also be argued that it isn't an increased cost because it's the normal course of installing a roof now. So it depended on the policy language. So a lot of times it really took a dive into the ordinance and law language, the way it was specifically written in that policy. But for most roofers, what you need to know is that you really don't need ordinance and law coverage unless there is something that is going to make an increased cost over the normal course of repairs. If it's more than what you would normally do. Decking is not something you need ordinance and law for if the decking is damaged. You have to have a proper nailing surface. It is a normal course of replacing a roof to identify problem areas in the decking and replace it. It isn't something that is going to be required by an enforcement. It's required in order to install the shingles. You don't need an enforcement for that to be required. It's a crazy thing that people think about ordinance and law for decking.
And it makes me think there's so many crazy things in the insurance claims process. There's so many crazy things that happen. Like you're saying with the decking, you need a nailable surface. Why would that ever be an argument in a claim, right? Like where would that ever, right? Like all of these things these points that are, it's very straightforward that this is how you build a roof. This is the damage. This is what we have. This is what we had here. This is what we have to put on. Mm-hmm. Like it seems pretty straightforward, but it gets entangled in the verbiage. Yeah. Right. It really gets entangled in the verbiage and the legalese of these policies. Right. And the homeowners have no idea.
Well, the policies are supposed to be written in plain language, Jim.
Of course.
They should be able to read it just fine.
Plain language is language that could be interpreted by my 6-year-old boys. They have a first grade reading level. They should be able to easily understand that policy.
Last time I interpolated a policy, I was 6 years old. Sounds like a mix between like a drip coffee maker and an insurance policy. That's how you damage a policy, with a drip coffee maker on top of it. Maybe Maybe there's secret messages hidden in it with disappearing ink. Only comes out with coffee.
There might
You
be.
never
If
know.
my kids got a hold of it, there would definitely be some kind of secret
Absolutely.
message in that.
Dad sucks. That's what my kids are, right?
So in knowing this, like in knowing, that there's always that it's not as clear cut, but like a lot of people listening might be in a retail area that's starting to get more storms and things like that. So they're starting to experience this claims process. They're not used to dealing with it like everyone in Florida and Texas.
Well, even in Florida and Texas, it's, you're right. The retail market is much stronger in other states, but even in those markets, there's a lot of misinformation out there.
For sure.
Being able to identify damage properly based on what policies actually say is very different from what some engineering firms might teach you to look for. There's the term functional damage has only really started appearing in policies in the last couple of years, and only as endorsements and things. So where did this term come from, and what is it? What does that have to do with anything? Do you really need matting damage in order to have damage? It's ridiculous to think that a shingle losing its granules from small hail is not damaged. That's a ridiculous statement. But this is the kind of thing that we really get into, and especially in our comp shingle course and specialty roof material course. Well, hell, all three of our roof inspection courses, really, we dig into the whole functional damage conundrum. But we really go into what is functional damage, why people look for it, and then what is physical damage, which is what most policies pay for.
Okay.
There's a big difference between the definition written by Hague Engineering for functional damage and what physical damage means in an insurance policy. Big difference.
So when a roofer is out, when a contractor, salesperson, inspector, project manager, whatever their title is out there doing their inspection, what is damage and what will be covered?
You have a physical change in a material, in something tangible. Physical damage is just a physical change. It could be physical change with a detriment. It could be something that causes tangible, discernible, demonstrable physical changes. And that's really all it is. It's a physical change. There are plenty of courts of law that have said things along those same lines. So unless the policy specifies otherwise with an endorsement or something along those lines, that's what you're looking for. Anything that would have been physically altered as a result of whatever the covered peril is, hail, wind, if it's physically altered, that generally is covered by most policies.
Nice. And so now we have to get into the policy side, right? So covered by most policies. And so what should roofers learn on the policy side to understand what they're dealing with when they go into that claim?
There are organizations that don't like that I do this.
You leaned in on that one, Matt.
I've had scrutiny applied to me. Lots of very abrasive scrutiny. We teach contractors how to read declarations pages of insurance policies. It is not, in my opinion, and I'm not a lawyer, this is not legal advice. And that's the stupid disclaimer I have to say every time I get on one of these things.
Yeah.
A declarations page just gives you a list of what the coverages are and what the limits are. It is a chart. It is a schedule of your policy coverages. It is not in itself the policy. There is nothing to interpret. It's just a list. Mm-hmm. So learning how to read that list can make a huge difference when you are trying to help someone determine if they want to file a claim or not. And you don't want to give advice that way for many states, because that could be interpreted as you acting as an attorney or acting as a public adjuster without a license. But you can give your opinions on things. Most states, and I'm not an attorney, and I might not be right for every state. So definitely talk to
laws.
Thank you.
Check your state laws.
Yeah,
to see if,
but either way,
Yes.
You know, I can teach anybody how to do anything. And I teach contractors how to read deck pages. And I think that it's important that they do that personally.
Yeah.
If you're going to be dealing with insurance claims, if you're going to be recommending to anybody that they might have an insurance claim, you don't want them to file a frivolous claim. That doesn't look good for them.
No, not at all. And so on that deck page, what are some of the things that a contractor would look for? Just the highlights, like I'm looking for this, that, just like the main things.
You want to look for ACV and RCV coverage, possibly RPS, the roof payment schedules, and then take a look at the list of endorsements. If anything says the word roof in it, that's probably something you need to have a PA or an attorney look at on behalf of the policyholder. Many policies don't actually label what the name of those endorsements are, though it might just be a list of letters and numbers, the form numbers. And if that is the case, then you might not have anything to go by to know what that endorsement is. And there's plenty of policies that are very different. Know this, contractors. 15 years ago, most policies were relatively the same. They were all roughly the ISO H03 form. And you could say fairly accurately that policies cover this and policies cover that. Today, every policy is so very different. There's very little that is the same from one policy to the next. There's not much that you can say definitively, this is covered by this type of thing. Even the form types, H03, H05, words you probably don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Those aren't even the same anymore. Things are changing dramatically, and policies have gotten longer and longer and longer with more and more words in them, becoming less and less plain language and less readable, or actually, in some cases, more and more plain language where they actually put down in writing all the ways in which you aren't actually covered for something, even though it was kind of implied that you were before. So some of those policies that really have very little coverage, if any, are actually really nice to have to show an insurance company and say, hey, well, if your policy had this language like this other policy does, then maybe it would say what you're saying, but your policy doesn't say this. This is an example of what your policy should say if you were, but it doesn't say that, does it? So you do owe for this after all, you schmucks.
It's the insurance claims industry is changing quickly, right? I've had guests on, especially about the Florida SB 76 and talking to attorneys about that. And one of the things that really stands out, and it's not correlation, but it really points to something when you look at the amount of lobbyists in the Florida state government on the insurance side versus the people's side, right? So so what kind of changes are you seeing that may be on the horizon, or things that they've done in a certain state that you're like, watch out for that, because they're doing something with that one there?
Well, there's definitely several things on the horizon for a lot of states. The Florida House Bill or Senate Bill 76 definitely introduced the concept of the roof payment schedule to Florida, but that is something that is in a lot of states already. The fact that they tried to codify it in Florida would suggest that maybe it wasn't legal to be able to be presented in Florida. What made it legal to be presented in the other states? It's there. It is a form of ACV payment, but it doesn't follow the actual cash value definition rules for a lot of cases, and often not even the actual cash value definition in their own policies. So there's a lot to be said there. The roof payment schedule fight is upon us. That's going to be something that's going to be fought over the next little while. Appraisal is also under attack. I come from a state where appraisal is already broken due to some bad case law from the Georgia Appellate Court, and it basically separated out amount of loss from scope. So in most states, you might not be able to determine coverages in appraisal, but you could at least determine the scope of damages, scope of loss, and how much it would cost to repair that. And in Georgia, scope is not part of amount of loss. So the way that they apply that, if you have your estimate and they have theirs, if there's one line item different between them, they'll say, no, that's a difference of scope, not a difference of amount of loss. This is not appraisable. And they get away with saying no to appraisal. You can demand appraisal if you have a different or a difference of amount of loss, and they will say, no, it's actually a difference of scope. And Georgia allows them to do that. And there are other states that are going down that same path. North Carolina now has that. But there is often fights, and you'll if you really start to look for it, there are fights where the carriers are trying to find specific cases to take as far as they can through appellate courts and try to get case law on something where it says, what the definition of amount of loss is that meets the definition that they want, that'll actually save them money down the road. So if you'll pay attention to that, keep in mind, these corporations, they're for-profit businesses. They need to save money. So they are always looking for the right case. They have huge, very high-end attorneys that are looking for the right case to take all the way. And they're looking for the case that doesn't have a good attorney on the other side attached to it. So if you deal with claims, if you're a contractor, you need to find yourself a good attorney. Otherwise, it might be your case that ends up going all the way and ruining things for a lot of people in your state. It is hard to overcome that. We still haven't overcome it in Georgia, trying very desperately to do things with the Department of Insurance, who I believe actually cares about the consumers in the state. But they don't recognize that there is a severe problem. And it's because many people don't file valid complaints. There's all kinds of issues there. We're fighting Goliath, and we're a bunch of little Davids. If we can come together and collaborate more and become a tribe of Davids, we've got a lot better chance. Now, part of the scope of this National Claims Institute, we want to teach everyone involved in the claims industry, contractors, public adjusters, insurance adjusters, engineers, even attorneys. We want to teach them all the same thing so that everybody is going into the claims side of things knowing the same information, not trying to get away with something else against someone else. If they all have the same combined education, then everybody should know what the other is supposed to do. And that makes things a lot simpler. So education is something that would definitely benefit the industry. And I hope it's an audacious goal for one school, but we want that to be something that we help the industry with. But ultimately, just be aware that there are always carriers looking for some way of getting some kind of a case through to an appellate court level that can set some case law that isn't going to work out. So appraisal's under attack. RPS schedule is probably going to try to be codified in your states. And they're going to start cracking down a lot on public adjusters specifically because we're effective. And there will be a lot of laws in a lot of states that or bills that are trying to be passed in order to restrict or put a barrier to entry in front of public adjusters, having to have bonds out the wazoo way more than an insurance adjuster ever would. Licensure is another issue. This is a whole topic all by itself. I'm deep into a lot of that, but it's not a fun topic.
but I love the passion behind it, and I love the big goal, because it would make things so much better for the consumer to have everyone on the same page.
If everybody's speaking the same language, it definitely helps out with communication. And I think that that's the biggest issue that we have with the opposite side. We're communicating one way, saying that this is what we believe is right. A lot of times we're wrong. And the other side is saying what they believe is right. And a lot of times they're wrong. But we're both wrong and we're both right. Probably 50-50 on a lot of things. And it makes for a very adversarial position because there's money involved. So if we can all be taught the same thing and both be wrong about the same things and right about the same things, at least, that unity can help us, alleviate a lot of that animosity and hopefully bridge a path where we can actually work a little bit more hand in hand with the carrier side. Most of them are great guys that really want to do what's right by the policyholder. But It's a matter of education. We'll see what
And that's
happens.
where the educated contractors, the ones that I know, like John Senek and a lot of good contractors I know, good salespeople, there's not an adversarial relationship with the adjusters that they deal with, because they're bringing a level of knowledge that is respectful, and they're not trying to get away with something, right? There are contractors out there that are trying to get away with it, right? They're trying to get away with getting this roof bought. When you're able to explain to an adjuster, this is my educated opinion on, or this is my reasoning, my educated reasoning on why this roof should be bought. Now the adversarial relationship is gone. It's not, oh, Mr. Contractor's trying to make an extra buck over there. I see what's going on. Right.
No, that's true. It's an interesting correlation, but the more education you have, the more confidence you have because of that education, the more likely it is that you're going to understand the other person's plight and be able to explain to them in a reasonable, logical manner why it is the way you're saying and not the way that they're saying. But if you don't have that, if you don't have the confidence level to back up, you feel like you're in a corner, that's when the beast comes out and you start to fight, and you might get a little adversarial. And a lot of the roofers are huge muscle heads and with really tall trucks that they can barely climb into. And I don't know, the adjusters, they can feel threatened. And when you threaten an animal, we're all animals.
That's right. That's right. And then, on just at the same time that if they don't feel, they still have to answer to someone too.
Yes, they do.
Right.
Yes, they do.
And so,
often I will talk to an adjuster and let them know that, the information that I'm providing, I'm happy to provide it to them in such a way that is manager friendly. That's what I like.
That's
to say.
right.
I will help you with your management so that they understand that this is necessary.
Yeah.
And if you go about it in that way, that's their biggest concern. Most field adjusters, they're worried about what their manager is going to say. So if you can help them with their manager, they're going to do everything they can to work with you. Most of them anyway. But again, they're just doing their job. They have a boss.
They have a boss. They have someone to answer to. They have billion-dollar companies to answer to sometimes.
They do.
With many layers of bosses all the way up. Versus the contractor with a team of 5 and running around, and they're the boss, right? So
that's very true. Yeah.
So that empathy in going into these situations, knowledge of the process, empathy for their job and what they're trying to do, everybody working towards the common goal of making the homeowner, property owner whole again. Right. Yeah. Like that's the way, man. I love what you're doing.
That is the way.
Love it, man. I love all of the things that you're doing. I love being part of a fellow member mentor in the Pitch Pro movement with you, and think that you're going to just be able to create so much value for the contractors in that movement. Thanks for your time today, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks for letting me on. And I love you too, Jim. Thank you, buddy.
This has been another episode of the Roofing Success Podcast. If you would like to generate more sales through your digital marketing efforts, please visit roofermarketers.com and get a copy of the book, Internet Marketing for Roofing Contractors, How to Triple Your Sales and Turn Your Roofing Website into an Online Lead Generation Machine. Also, check the training section of the website for guides on everything from running effective pay-per-click ads to how to properly set up your Google My Business listing. This has been another episode of the Roofing Success Podcast. Thanks for listening.